So, good afternoon. I hope everybody had a good day. I'm really, really honored to be keynoting here this year. I've been speaking at this conference for 3 and 4 years now, and it's nice to be up on the big stage, so thank you. I imagine a lot of you have probably met me over the course of the last couple of days. If you've been down in the cloud bar or the actual bar last night, you probably had a conversation with me. So my name is Davey Shafik. I'm a community engineer at Engine Yard. Engine Yard is a cloud access management platform, which means we take your PHP apps and we scale them in the cloud. Great 24/7 support. So I've been at Engine Yard for 3 years now, and over those 3 years, I've been very, very fortunate to be able to spend most of my time just interacting with and hopefully helping this community. So the first time that I spoke at Engine Yard was 2012, right here at PHP UK. And I was speaking about what was new in PHP 5.4. And Rasmus was keynoting that morning, and he mentioned in his keynote that I was giving this talk. And then he turned up right in the front row of my first speaking engagement in 2 years, and I was very nervous. I'd actually spent like months on my slides. I was so prepared, but I finished them in December and didn't look at them until February. Wasn't very smart. But so Rasmus is there, and sat right behind him is Johan Sluter, who was the release manager for 5.4. A lot of pressure. And you can imagine, they're filming and all this sort of stuff. It was great. Speaking of people who put the pressure on, my mum is sitting right here in the front row. This is the first time that she's ever seen me speak, so I better not fuck it up. Sorry, Mum. So while speaking here 3 years ago was fun, there's been a couple of other events over the last 3 years that have been really, really important to me. The first one, and the most important, is the birth and adoption of my son, Gabriel. As you can imagine, that's quite a big deal, changes your perspective quite a bit on life. For me, I started thinking about, who is my son going to be when he grows up, and how can I help him sort of realize his dreams? The second was almost as important to me, but it wasn't just for me, and that is that Engine Yard launched Prompt. And for those of you who don't know, Prompt is an initiative that we started to get people talking about mental health and to try and remove the stigma around talking about mental health, because a lot of people in our community do suffer from some sort of mental illness, and it kills people. Like the highest rate of death in the planet is like suicide from like depression and things like this, and it's because we don't talk. So this was really important to me, and both of these events had a very similar effect on me. They sort of made me start to think, how can I leave the planet just a little bit better than when I got here? So Martin Luther King famously said, "Life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others?" So I got involved in Prompt, and that's been great. I got more involved in PHP Women. I'd been part of the group since day 2, literally, and became lead in the US. And those have both been amazing. But I felt like it wasn't enough. Like, it's helping a small subset of people, it's helping our community, which I love, but it doesn't help the world. And let's be honest, like, we make up a very small percentage of people on the planet. And I felt that I had a platform. This is a platform. I get to speak to you people. And I have a skill set. I've been a developer for 15 years, and I hope that I'm quite competent at this point, and I can do things. So I wanted to figure out what I could do to really help people. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. So I'm going to talk about open source. I'm going to talk about passion and love and this community that we're a part of. And I hope that you will go away just thinking about things that are bigger than ourselves and kind of our jobs and our day-to-day lives. But I'm going to start by talking about something very familiar to most of us, which is lines of code. So I apologize because I'm going to ask people to put up their hands and have audience participation, but who thinks they have the largest code base in terms of lines of code? Anyone going to be brave enough to? So I hear that Facebook is somewhere between 10 and 50 million lines of code, which is kind of incredible. So who has at least 100,000 lines of code? 200? Who has more than Facebook? Anybody? All right. So my biggest project ever that I worked on personally was about 330,000 lines of code. And I've done some research, and basically, you're all liars. So we'll go into that. So who uses Symfony 2? Quite a few. How many lines of code do you think Symfony 2 has? Anyone want to guess? I can't hear you, so we'll just... So it has 382,000 lines of code. Anyone use Laravel? Come on. So Laravel is actually tiny. It's only 90,000 lines of code. And then my personal favorite, Zen Framework 2. Anyone want to guess?
4 million.
So it's 650,000. Actually, I thought about this. I'm like, that's quite a lot. But they've got a few concrete implementations of web services and stuff. So I think that's where it comes from. But what this means is if you're using either Symfony or Zen Framework, your code base is already as big or twice as big as my largest project. And you've never even written a line of code yet, right? So before you even get started, your project is huge. But what if you go a little bit further? Who wants to guess how many lines of code PHP has? It has about 1.5 million lines of code. It's quite a lot. But we don't use PHP alone. We use Nginx or Apache maybe, MySQL, PostgreSQL. If you're web scale, maybe you're using Mongo. And Memcache. I don't know if you can see like the pixel here. There we go. Just 22,000 lines of code. This animation actually crashed my laptop. To scale that big circle that big, I had to do it differently. But of course, we can take this one step further, which is that they're all sitting on top of an operating system. And it's probably Linux. Sorry, Microsoft. It's probably Linux, and that sits on top of the Linux kernel. So the Linux kernel is 17.8 million lines of code, which is just a huge number. I would not want to be maintaining that. But there are some other important numbers that we should be thinking about. So PHP has 224 individual contributors. That's people that have actually committed to the repository, so they've got karma. MySQL has just 28, which I find quite incredible. Apache has 25. Mongo has 204. Postgres has 21, and Memcached has 71. Laravel has 526. Zen Framework has 629, and Symfony has over 1,000 contributors. And what that means is that if your app is sitting on top of a standard LEMP stack, so Linux, Nginx, MySQL, and PHP, it's made possible by over 23 million lines of code and 4,800 people. These are kind of incredible things to think about. As a side note, when I was gathering all of these statistics, I noticed that Nginx has exactly 404 files. Thought that was quite amusing for a web server. But I decided that this wasn't enough, and I decided to take it one step further, because maybe I'm a little bit neurotic about these things. But I installed Ubuntu Trusty server on a VM, and I wrote a script that went and got all of the source packages for everything that was installed with PHP and the LEMP stack. And the number that I came away with was 69.5 million lines of code. And then if you add to that the 1.4 million lines of code that is the PHP manual, which we all use, we actually end up at over 70 million lines of code. That's what it takes to get an app before we've even written any of our code out on the internet. So, I think that we owe all of these contributors, all of these people, a huge round of applause for all that they do for us. They give it away for free. There's a bunch of us in the room today. So round of applause for all of those people. And I think we are, without doubt, we're standing not on the shoulders of giants, which is what I got up here, but we're actually at the top of a very large human pyramid. Better way to think of it. Never before in our history, like of the planet, have we had such a readily available body of work upon which to base our work and like to get us forward further and quicker. It would kind of be as if the actual pyramids had been pre-built and they were just hanging from a crane and you just got in and sort of positioned them and put them down, right? That's where we're starting from. And what do we use this for, right? Yo app, Tinder, Instagram's for gerbils, and Uber for figuring out what to eat for lunch. And I think these things are fun, right? We laugh about it, but they might improve our lives in a very small way, and it's obviously a very first world thing, isn't it? And I think they're kind of wasting this amazing gift that we've been given. I think we're really privileged to have all of this open source body of work to work upon. And I think that we owe it to ourselves and to those contributors and to society to use it for something that's really meaningful. So why should we care? I think that there's one thing that drives literally thousands of people over multiple decades to write millions of lines of code. We miss family dinners, we miss vacations, we miss drinks with friends and dinners with spouses, and then we give it all away for free. We're nuts. So what drives that? It's passion, and it's love. Passion for the art of programming, or the challenge, or just an interest in technology. Passion for society. For whatever reason that we do it because we love to do it. I really think that love is what drives us to participate in this living, breathing organism that is open source. We get a lot of crap flung at us, if we're open source maintainers. We get a lot of criticism, we get a lot of entitled users, mailing lists, and everything else. And we keep doing this because we love sharing these things that we love. Will Wheaton was once asked why it's awesome to be a nerd. And he had this to say. He said, it's not about what you love, it's about how you love it. The way you love it and the way that you find other people who love that thing the way you do is what makes being a nerd awesome. And the defining characteristic of us, the people in this room, the defining characteristic that ties us all together is that we all love things. Find the things that you love, and you love them the most that you can. So for me, the thing that I love is I love to teach. Doesn't matter if it's up here on stage at a conference, or I'm standing in front of a user group, or doing it remotely via a Hangout, blog post, podcast, it doesn't matter. I love teaching. And I also genuinely love this community. It's been there for me for almost 2 decades. I really think that this community has enabled me to get where I am today. Moving to the United States, getting married twice, adopting my son, working at Engine Yard, and being on this stage right now is all because of this community. So for me, I call this my family. I love you guys. So my first mentor, Joey Smith, goes by TML on Freenode. I met him at 16 years old, and I actually got to meet him in person for the first time last May. It was amazing. And then after that, I moved to America, and my wife had lost her job. I wasn't able to work. I didn't have my visa. And when I did get my visa, I blogged about it. And this guy, Rob Richards, he's the guy who created all things XML and PHP 5. He emailed me, and he said, I know of a job. They're kind of dicks, but they pay well. So I went and I interviewed, and I had the job on that Thursday, and I was there for 6.5 years. So in 2006, my first wife passed away, and I pretty much dropped out of the community. But despite that, the members of the community came and they found me and they helped me. People like Elizabeth Smith and Sarah Goldman, they're my internals mentors. Elizabeth Naramore, who I consider my community and my life mentor. And Beth Tucker-Long, who's here today. She's sort of my writing mentor. Matthew Turland, he's one of my many code mentors. My co-author, Ben Ramsey, he stepped up because I couldn't, and he wrote the second revision of the Zen Certification Study Guide, the third version of which came out last week. We're giving one away. I'm really proud of it. And then Ligaya Termel is my MySQL mentor, and she actually went on to be the best man at my second wedding and last wedding. So even today, it's still helping me. This is not something that stops. So last year at PHP Tech, Engine Yard sponsored the Mental Health Summit, Prompt and Engine Yard. And Paddy Foran gave a very passionate monologue about living with depression, and it struck a chord with me. And 4 months later, I finally started therapy, which, by the way, is amazing. You pay somebody like a little bit of money, and they can't tell you to shut up for an hour. Right? So right now, that's my therapist. So right now, I'm trying to lose weight. So that's one of the reasons I'm pacing the stage. My phone is counting every step. Right? But it's not just me. Last year, Cal Evans, who a lot of you probably have heard of, the great Cal Evans, set up a collection to try and raise funds to bring a guy we all know as 7PHP, because nobody can say his real name. Wanted to bring him off his tiny island of Mauritius, which is, if you don't know, off the coast of Madagascar, which is itself a tiny island off the coast of Africa. And we wanted to bring him to Sunshine PHP, which was this last February in Miami. And as you can see, we managed, and we got him there. And this is just one of many stories that happen in this community. We got together and we bought a one-handed keyboard for a disabled member of our community, and she now types at 90 words per minute with one hand. One of our community members lost his unborn daughter, and we made a memorial for her. And a new internals contributor, we brought her into our very first conference at PHP Northwest in October this last year. You may remember back in 2004, there was a tsunami that hit Indonesia, and it killed 225,000 and displaced 1.7 million people. And within hours of that happening, a web app sprung up, and specifically a PHP web app. And it was written to help people find displaced family members. And I was so incredibly proud that they used PHP, because this is the language that I've had some very tiny, insignificant part in building. And it's something that really made a meaningful impact in people's lives. So every person in this room who has contributed to PHP internals, to the documentation, any open source project, any person who has been a mentor, written a blog post, an article for PHP Architect, or has in any way contributed to this community, we should all be very proud of the fact, because it isn't just the people that write the C code on the internals, it's all of us that make this possible. And just like those people, I believe that the challenges that we face on this planet can be solved by technology. I really think that every problem that we face in this world can be solved by the application of technology. And not web technology, of course, in every case, but technology is the answer to all of our problems. And I mean real things like world hunger or animal extinction. Right? And I'm not the only one. I thought that would go a lot better, I'm sorry. I'm not the only one that feels this way, though. In recent years, there's been the growth of a new kind of corporation, the benefit corporation, or BCorps. And unlike traditional LLC or LTD type corporations, which these companies still are, being a B Corp actually just means being certified in that your company pledges to do and be good for the world. And every company that signs up signs a declaration of interdependence. Sounds very American, but it's not. Which holds these truths self-evident. That we must be the change that we seek in the world. That all business ought to be conducted as if people and place mattered. And that through their products, practices, and profits, businesses should aspire to do no harm and benefit all. And finally, that to do so requires that we act with the understanding that we are each dependent upon each other and are thus responsible for each other and future generations. Over 900 companies in 29 countries are now participating, including one large PHP shop, which is Etsy. So Etsy supports a community of micro-enterprises, and they allow underprivileged people access to a global marketplace. And by doing that, it allows creators to sell directly, cutting out the middleman. And they can undercut, because the middleman usually makes all the money, but now they're selling directly. So they can undercut, but they're still making more money than they ever did before. And it's a huge change to their quality of life. They can really make a proper living wage. But Etsy and BCorps are not the only ones participating. In response to Superstorm Sandy that hit the East Coast in 2012, Airbnb created a disaster response tool. And it can be activated within 30 minutes of some sort of natural disaster. And since 2012, this tool has been used in numerous places to allow hosts to put up their rooms for free. And Airbnb doesn't take their cut, and people can stay and find somewhere to stay when they've been displaced. And it's been used in San Diego when they had major fires, Serbia, Bosnia, and Croatia for people affected by the Balkan floods, London, Sardinia, and Colorado after serious flooding hit those regions, Kefalonia after an earthquake hit the island, Toronto and Atlanta, which is just north of me, when they were hit by severe ice storms, and the Philippines following Typhoon Haiyan. Another great example is IBM's Big Data for Social Good challenge. It invites developers and data enthusiasts to take a deep dive into real-world civic data sets using IBM's Hadoop and analytics service. And you can supply your own data set, or you can use one that they provide for you, like information on the Ebola outbreaks, US traffic light data, and bike share data. So most of us work with first world problems, but what if we look at the real issues that our planet faces? So E.F. Schumacher wrote, "The poor can be helped to help themselves, but only by making available to them a technology that recognizes the economic boundaries and limitations of poverty." And what this means is that when we're looking at these kind of third world issues, we have to attack them using readily available local technologies. So to help a farmer, we could drop this wonderful tractor in his field off one day. But honestly, it's only going to be about as powerful, assuming he could even figure out how to use the thing. It's only going to be useful to him for about as long as the gas in the tank is there, right? But if you give him an ox and a plow, this is a technology that is sustainable and maintainable for the locale. So who can tell me what the most popular cell phone on the planet is? I'll give you a hint. It doesn't have this logo. Or this one. Has this one. So, it doesn't have a 4-inch touchscreen, it has a 4-line text screen. And it is the Nokia 1100. And it's popular because the battery life lasts for weeks, and it's durable, and it's cheap, and it's tough as well, a Nokia. Right? It also includes a flashlight, which is incredibly indispensable in places that don't have access to consistent and available electricity. So over 500 million of these devices have sold since it was created in 2003. You may have heard a couple of months ago, Microsoft announced a new phone and made a very big splash about it. It was the new $27 phone. I think that was Australian dollars, which is like nothing, which was the Nokia 130. And this is the first new phone since 2003 that has actually had a shot at replacing this phone as the most popular phone on the planet. And it's barely even a feature phone. So it has, this is it, it has an FM radio, it has video playback, but it can't do images, like still images. I find that odd. And it also has a flashlight still. It doesn't have a web browser, it can't do MMS. So this is a picture of every single device that is connected to the internet at the time this was made. And according to 2011 research, only 13.5% or 150 million Africans have access to the internet. That's about 6% of their population. When you compare that to developed countries, we're at about 73%. That's a huge gap. And you look at this and you can go, well, obviously web pages are not how we're going to reach these people. They don't have access. But in 2014, 778 million Africans activated cell phones. That means about 70% of the population has a cell phone. So what that means is if you want to solve problems in third world countries like those in Africa, you're not going to do it with web pages, but you might be able to do it with text messages, because they'll have access to those. SMS is huge. Yes, it's going to bring entirely different problems in terms of usability, bandwidth, but it is possible. I believe it's possible. And it's also a great example of using locally available resources. All right, so what can you do? Like, what practically can you do? So I looked at some real-world problems, and I came up with some ideas. I don't know if they're any good, but these are real. So approximately every 15 minutes, an elephant is killed by poachers. That means that by 2011, they could be extinct. Sorry, in 11 years, they could be extinct. So can you imagine an app that allowed people to text the authorities in real time about the location of poachers? This is an actual possible thing that we could do, and it would be fairly trivial. Every day, 840,000 people die from water-related diseases. What if you could blast out a warning via text message to a village of people to tell them that their water resource has been polluted, that today is not safe to drink, or make sure you use your tablets or whatever filtering you have, right? And every year, 1.5 million children die from vaccine-preventable diseases. And the big problem actually with this is not that the vaccines aren't even available, it's that we can't disperse them. It's very hard. So what if you could text a mother and say, hey, there are vaccines available within a day's walk of where you are. Take your kids. we can reach a lot more people that way. And these are things that can really change the world. So I'll fully admit that I don't know all the problems, never mind the solutions. Part of our jobs is to ask questions, make the tools and the learning resources available, and to help these people help themselves. How many of you, when I was describing those 3 actionable things, thought, I could really do that. I could go home and do that right now? What's stopping you? Get out there and change the world. Thank you.